So, welcome everyone to Architecture 3700. My name is Robert Cowherd. I'm teaching with Ignacio Cardona, and we are number 4. We are not the most important source of understanding. The world is number 1. Architecture is number 2. It helps us understand the world in ways that other people don't have access to. Your colleagues are number 3. And on a good day, we pick up the rear. If your colleagues missed anything, we're here to fill in the gaps. Okay? So we've arrived at class number 1. This is traditionally, this is the first class of the course. We just moved it to the end of the semester for reasons that you should all be familiar with by now. What we will do every week in this course is we open it with our student panel who gives us burning questions that most urgently must be answered in order to help us survive and thrive in the 21st century. With your leadership, take it away, student panel. Good, right? Let's put the lights on so we can try to see what's on the board. Like the small notice. Do you want to shield your eyes? Okay.
When I remember the reflection in some of the questions.
I push the up arrow and it turns off.
The questions, even if you want to follow with the reflection.
Smart skills.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. We hope y'all are doing well. So right now, as for our point, we have the final discussion, which is Cosmos and Community. And we've listed out 6 key questions in basing in all from the questions and discussions we had. So the first one is, how can urban design prioritize joy, memory, and healing while addressing basic needs? The second is decentralization a viable path to overcome the failures of modern cities? And how can the urban core be reimagined to foster genuine community inclusivity? The third is, in a globalized world, how can cities preserve cultural identity and historical continuity while embracing modernization? 4 is, are we initially drawn to cities for connection, or are the current urban forms isolating? So the 5 is, what would a city look like if designed not just for function, but spiritual and emotional meanings? And then the last burning question is, what challenges must be addressed to create an integrated post-tribal communities that support both ecological balance and human dignity?
And then some reflections that you can get from the discussion post this week is that urban density is not inherently communal. Transformation requires mindset shifts, and in that sense, it requires shifts for the entire community for something to work. Urban life can isolate, not connect. So people feel very isolated and very like one path, like they have one purpose in the city and that's their thing. Modern cities prioritize systems over souls, like the city as a machine rather than the city as people and community. Cultural identity can anchor modernization, and decentralization offers freedom but risks fragmentation because you're isolated.
And so the topic 1 is kind of like mostly prioritize the joy in addressing needs, such as from somewhat addressing in like, are modern cities capable of fulfilling those social and communal purposes where they originally built? And the reply from Tyler is saying that these cities are catered to population to increase in the future. With the rising population, people in the city, the infrastructure and identity of modern cities grow as they adapt in order to accommodate.
For our key question number 2, how decentralization a viable path to overcoming failures in modern cities? So I guess in many factors we found that urban life kind of touching upon what Joanna said, we found that urban life kind of isolates people and kind of prioritizes more efficiency. So how can we bring that to each community in the areas that it affects, as well as something that Liam mentioned was how is changing the system important, but also changing people in mindset as well. So not only the people in the community, but those in power over the areas and the economy. How can those people help bring those values through? Pull down. For topic 3, culture under globalization, how can cities preserve cultural continuity while embracing these new factors? So, Liam said, what are the implications of rejecting the idea that history repeats itself? And how can we learn from historic examples of communities that have been how can we learn from past examples that weren't as effective as opposed to some that were more effective? You want me to keep reading?
For human density and socialization, the three questions that stood out to us was, are we innately drawn to cities for connection, or our current urban forms of obstruction? Which is very interesting, and the answers were very appealing for this question, because I think it's a very complicated question, honestly, when you think about it. And I have some answers here, but yeah, and then we also have another questions, which is very interesting from Maddie. If cities are no longer what they used to be, are people choosing to live in cities now for a genuine need of desire, or are they conforming to seemingly outdated social patterns that no longer serve them? So it's is it a question of necessity to live in a big city and we're just used to what we have now? Or are they living in the city because they like it? People like the niceness of the city, or is it just out of necessity that they live in the city, like we have around Boston? Places like that. Okay, for topic 5, we also since we give it the name of spiritual, civic, and emotional urban form. The key question that we focused on generally is, what would a city look like if designed not just for function, but a spiritual and emotional meaning? This is I think would be really nice to dig more into that, because yes, we need functionality, but we need more than that. I think creating spaces for community, for people to be comfortable at, is more important than just being functional for the sake of time's sake, being quick and stuff like that. So some questions that implied to that meaning was from Evelyn, and she said, why were places like the mosque and Basel central to Islamic cities in both spiritual and civic terms? So I think it's question, how can you combine both, bringing the civic into also having a deeper meaning to the structure, to the building, to the place that we're at.
Then lastly, for the 6th topic, it's the post-tribal and eco-integrated communities, and especially highlighting the fact of what the challenges can be addressed to create those integrated communities that support both the balance and human dignity. And it's something interesting of in today, most communities are trying to have those human dignities amplified in the ecological balance. So such as Kelly had a question of how can we effectively transition from fragmented traditional cities to integrate life-centered regions that address both social aspiration and environmental sustainability. Something that Mackenzie replied in, saying that integrating those urban designs with natural systems such as the green infrastructure, and as well as having prioritize walkable mixed-use neighborhoods with public spaces to support those needs and reflect in those social and environmental needs. That's what we got.
Okay.
Hold your applause.
What did they miss? Is there anything that deserves to be emphasized?
That
that could be something that they already say,
Yeah,
but you want to highlight, so because
Yeah.
they're saying anything.
we have red markers and we can underline things, or we can write.
So the question here, and probably I'm asking you, Mackenzie, is what do you think is really, really important to you? Of your list?
Like for us to figure out in this lecture. That's why we ask the tough questions.
Which ones are?
She says it's a tough one.
It's a tough one, yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's where you're
It's very, very difficult, I know. Tyler, any,
I mean, what stuck out to me is probably what my question related to, which is like what's drawing people to the city and why do we live in cities to begin with? So I think that's an interesting point to sort of wrap up this semester as a whole.
Yeah, why we live in the city. That's good.
that's good. That's a good one.
So, yeah,
Why not to live in a city?
what?
Why not to live in a city?
Yeah, why, what are the best reasons to get out of the city?
No, I mean, if the city has more job opportunities for me, promises, better living standards for me, why will I not come to the city?
Well, a lot of people work in cities, but don't live in cities. That's kind of the whole deal. It's kind of the American system or operating system. You work in the city, you live outside of the city.
Do you think that's fair?
Is it fair?
How can we prioritize those living in the city?
Well, it's turned out to be a machine for producing inequality. So not only is it not fair, it's a machine for producing unfairness because of the way we fund schools. If you care about your children's education, you kind of get driven out of the city because the school system in Wellesley is better funded than the school system in Boston. It's a machine for creating inequality and the quality of education. The United States is the only country in the world that does it that way.
And it's a machine to produce climate issues at the same time.
Right, it produces climate issues. The driving to and from the suburbs is one of the single largest contributors to climate change.
If not the most.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were discussing the seminar that a place like Rochester in the middle of a suburban area, North New York, is less sustainable than New York City.
Yes.
Because of the amount of carbon emissions we produce to drive there and to maintain the city and so on.
Right, and you assume that the worst polluting place in the world is in New York City, and the best place or the worst polluting place in the country is New York, because it's obviously filthy. And the best place is the pristine plains of Wyoming where I just was weeks ago.
And the data shows that it's the opposite.
It's the opposite. Wyoming is the highest carbon emitter per capita, and New York is the lowest carbon emitter per capita by many multiples. So much greener to live in New York than it is to live in Wyoming. Wyoming's the worst, New York is the best. I mean, it's counterintuitive. We think the opposite. Yeah,
Why is that? Why is it?
driving.
Because of the amount of carbon that we produce when we are driving.
Mhm.
People drive more in Wyoming and they drive less in New York, and that's really the bulk of the.
Yeah, and all that, when they say drive, it's people, but also trash, food, everything. They will have to drive a lot in order to take out the trash in Wyoming.
Right.
Or to give or to provide food to Wyoming. Yeah.
Is there agriculture in Wyoming? Yes, there is. There's a lot of livestock more than anything else. So carbon emissions from agriculture, pretty big. Livestock. The ceiling's not high enough. Sorry, livestock, big one.
and lifestyle.
Well, let's talk about spirituality and joy.
Yeah.
This is today's topic, right? How do you have cities be a machine for generating joy? What happens in cities that generates joy? That's the question. We don't have to answer them all. But we're stacking up questions now. Anything else that deserves to be, this is like stump the lecturers, stump us. Give us a question that we're gonna have trouble answering with our slides. You have anything? Shouldn't be that hard to stump us. We're really not that smart. You should be able to stump us. Nothing? Well, if you think of something in the middle of our presentations, you tell us. Ask us questions that we will struggle to answer. Because turnabout is fair. We're constantly asking you questions because they're hard questions. You can do that for us too. Thank you. Good. Okay. So as I pointed out, in a lot of ways, this is the first lecture of the course. This course has been taught for 100 years or more. It's the history of cities. We might call it something, concentration, blah, blah, blah. But it's the history of cities. It's the same course, more or less, as the one that's been taught for 100 years. Historically, we go back in the historic record and we look at the first evidence of the first cities, and we learn about those first cities, and it's very entertaining, but does it help us pay off our student loans? Does it help us rise to the top? Does it help us become relevant to what society needs architects to address? Historically, no, and proudly so. Some of my colleagues won't talk to me anymore because I insist that history is not about staying true to everything in the historical record. The historical record is too big, it's too deep, it's too thick, and it keeps getting deeper, thicker, and bigger. And we are obligated to ourselves and our neighbors to curate history, to identify those things that are going to help us, and to focus on those things. And if your laptop is open, it's why? Because it's the review today? Yeah. Yeah, close those. Close those laptops. Are you writing notes? Yeah. Okay. And so if it's relevant to our future as leaders in the discipline of architecture, we care about it. And last week, we were looking at these alternative paradigms of how we approach the understanding of how our architectural and environmental systems work. And Ignacio presented that we need to expand what we think about. We need to be less narrow-minded, less formulaic, less focused on economic output of our society and our systems. We need to look at not just development as the opposite of conservation, but where development and conservation actually are part of each other, and a more holistic approach, which means we need to embrace complexity. That if there's one theme that pervades all of the thinking about how we're going to solve the problems of the 21st century effectively, It is to stop thinking so narrowly in such a siloed manner, one-dimensional approach to solving problems. We need to think more holistically. That's why architects are the new go-to discipline, the go-to occupation for solving the biggest problems. Engineers caused the problems. Traffic engineers caused the problems. Petroleum engineers caused the problems. Economists caused the problems by thinking too narrowly. And architects, what do architects do? They don't master structural engineering, but they understand how structural grids work. They don't master passive and active systems and mechanical engineering topics, but they understand it well enough to know the important considerations. They're not scientifically, they don't understand the physics of heat transfer through an envelope. They just know that thermal bridging is something to be avoided, right? Who else but architects have enough knowledge of all of these different engineering specialties to bring them together into an integrated whole system that not only works together with the structure, the envelope, the mechanical systems all working together, but they work together in a way to actually amplify the design ideas of the building that they're designing. Architects do this. Who else does this? It's pretty rare. Doctors understand lots of different systems. But increasingly, when we're facing the big problems of society, and the question is who you're going to call, it is not Ghostbusters, it is the architect. So let's look at this. So normally we would have 300 slides about the early first cities, and we learn, this ruler defeated that ruler and conquered this territory, and et cetera, et cetera. But we don't have time for that. We don't care unless it's going to help us. So we can very quickly dispatch with some of these histories, which is a good thing because we've got more important things to talk about. But just so you know, the cartoon version of what we used to talk about, first of all, we would spend an hour or a week on what is a city. We define a city at one point in the teaching of this class. We'd say a city is any gathering of humans of 100,000 or more, or we try to put a number on it. And then we change it the next year, we change it the next year, and it turns out it just doesn't matter. The definition of the city is not about the size of the population. And we talk about cities versus suburbs versus rural landscapes. All the hours and hours and the blah, blah, blah devoted to defining what a city is. We don't care. A city is as a city does. We know it's a city because we're connected with other people. In the age of the internet, we are all urban occupants. Everywhere in the world, we are connected with dozens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of other people constantly every day because we are interconnected unless we deliberately choose to isolate ourselves. The entire planet is a city now. So are we okay with that? Do we have to spend any more time on that? I hope not. So we don't have to do that. Yes, human populations moved. This is an interesting one. Before we had scientific systems, we invented shared understandings that helped us manage social groupings so we could operate together better than a bunch of squabbling individuals. We form families, extended families, neighborhoods, tribal units. We're able to make decisions collectively because collective decision-making is something that turns out matters a great deal. And up until recently, we thought, well, market forces and economics, those are the forces that produce collective decisions. But look at how that turned out. Allowing market forces to be the sole basis for collective decision-making has not turned out so well. So a lot of people are taking a fresh look at religious systems and belief systems. And it turns out we have, if there's the theme, city as a cosmological model, turns out to be, when we look at these old cities, we can learn how the operating system of these societies, guided by rules that were given through religious inheritance, religious systems, and developed through religious systems, we can now say, how did they perform? Did they do a better job than our modern economic system, or a worse job? It's nothing magical. In many cases, they performed much, much worse. And in some cases, they've performed so much better that we have a renewed appreciation, and we're looking at them more deeply to see if we can figure out how we might be able to do things better. You got a taste for that when we were looking at Islamic cities, and the rules of Sharia that governed urban form in order to produce greater privacy, greater dignity, respect for diversity, and a tolerance for difference. So this is one of the interesting things. As we whiz through this content, when we look at Jat al Huyuk, no one's from Turkey, so no one can correct my pronunciation of Jat al Huyuk. But Jat al Huyuk, we're interested in it because in a way, it did the opposite of what we do. Instead of having streets between its buildings, the homes were buried. They were dug out of the ground, and the material dug out was built up between the homes. And so they sunk half into the ground and rose halfway up. And basically, you moved across the city by walking on the roofs, and you walk into the units going down. So that's one really interesting thing. Completely opposite system of what we developed into, that we do now. The other thing is that every single building is identical to every other building. They're all homes. And this brings up the topic of specialization. When societies started to move from subsistence gathering to agricultural methods, they actually freed up a lot of time and labor so that they could develop specialization. The first specialization we see in Jat al Huyuk is the priest class that can offer guidance for everyone else. And so where's the church? Where's the temple? Where's the holy shrine? Where's the holy place? The architecture is identical to a home. So basically, there's one way to create a dwelling unit, and they just simply assign one of them to be a place where the rituals of religious practice take place. So that's interesting. So that's a mixed use. That's what it looked like, we think. They entered through the roof. They buried their dead below the floor, so their ancestors were always there with them. So that's an interesting reference point. But what really is interesting about this stuff is we notice, we talked about this in History Theory 1, that the first civilizations that we talk about, Egypt, remember that class that week, the lecture on Egypt, remember that? Egypt, which formed along the Nile River. Then, I don't know if you talked about, no, you probably, and Yangtze River Valley is another one. Then Mesopotamia, right? Do you remember all these? They all share in common that the basis of their formation was not just agriculture, it was agriculture made possible because of a plentiful supply of water. So river systems became the basis for the emergence of cities all over the world independently of each other. It's not like, hey, I met this guy in the port who was trading. He came here and he told me about this really cool thing. It's called a city. Let's try it. No, that's not how cities spread. They emerged independently of each other all over the world over the course of several thousand years, all based on these cycles, these water cycles. They start out as natural forces. This is similar to what we talked about last week about the underwater canals. The natural patterns that we see of water movement are first observed and then built upon and augmented. So, like we see here, the river floods, humans build these levees. As the floodwaters recede, we hold back the water in these levees. So now, for many months after the flooding season, it just doesn't go dry and stop being wet. You now have access to water for irrigation. Now you have the basis of a surplus food production. And it frees up labor and time for specialization. So this is in the cartoon version of the history of cities, which you should at least have a taste of. And Liam, can you put away your phone? It's very distracting. Thank you. It's the freed up labor allows specialization. So different people can start to do different activities other than subsistence farming, which is these fulfillment of basic needs. So now we do have time and labor and focus and attention to take care of other things, maybe even to the point of taking care of joy, the arts. And so this is the cartoon version of how cities were first emerged. It was based on these large operating systems that freed up time away from the supply of basic needs to do other things. And as soon as you have specialization, you need systems of communication and record keeping. So you develop writing and record keeping, and you have the first historic records, which are Jimmy 16 bushels of wheat to Lenny, etc. This is the first writing. But then it becomes elevated, and you need systems of exchange beyond barter. And so we move up, and we heard about how paper transactions were invented in Amsterdam in 1602. So these are the roots of all that. And around every city, you start to see walls. Here's Babylon. And I want to quickly move forward. Mohenjo-Daro is a recently discovered archaeological site in the Indus River Valley in what is now Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northern India, the Indus River Valley. And it was all about the water, not surprisingly. And we quickly moved to large ordering systems that were capable of organizing collective decision-making and the way entire societies engage with each other through networks of trade, because they were all guided by these large set of religious principles, which, unlike the way many of us experienced Christianity growing up, it's not separate from everything else. It is overarching everything. So the trade networks of the Indian Ocean that dominated the world for centuries, and the Europeans attempted for hundreds of years, the Europeans were attempting to figure out where are all these spices coming from. And the Muslim traders were devoted to a system of concealing those sources and protecting those trade routes. They were organized by this large operating system that very successfully was never broken for hundreds and hundreds of years. The Chinese have a similar system. This is the Forbidden City in Beijing. They have a similar operating system that proved to be very robust, in part because it was reinforced at every level of the hierarchy, from the city to the region, to the towns, to the neighborhoods, to the extended families, the households. And in every interaction with every other human, you're constantly referring to the operating systems that holds it all together. And so it becomes very coherent and very pervasive, and it governs the behaviors, the way people treat each other, and the transactions, the way transactions are made, and it's reinforced architecturally. These systems do not survive without the physical manifestations of the belief system. So the structure of the city is almost a direct replication of the diagram of the relationship between heaven and earth, between the gods and people. And so Hindu religion and Hindu cities had a similar, very direct relationship. And we don't have time to look at this example because I want to move on to this example. So we assume, mostly correctly, that this is the study of a distant past that is gone. It was forgotten, but we're slowly digging it back. And who thinks that this stuff is gone and forgotten, or at least gone? Is it gone? Is someone going to ask you to study a religious system that you're not familiar with and design something that reinforces forces of that religious system? Is anyone ever going to ask you to do that? Probably not. Or so we thought. That's what I thought. I graduated from architecture school, and I've had a very productive career as an architect for 3 years, and then a recession hit. And I was about to get laid off because there was no more work. And just so happened I had an interest in the country of Indonesia because my girlfriend was interested in Indonesia, and we broke up, but I was still interested in Indonesia. But she sent me this photo, and I said, whoa, that's cool. Look at that. It's a building that is also a gateway, and there's this garden in the back, even though in the foreground there's all these slums. So I started to look into it, and there really was nothing written about it. So I did what one does during a recession. I applied for a grant, and I got a 3-month grant to go study the interplay between culture and architecture in this sacred religious city in the center of Java in Southeast Asia, in the country of Indonesia. So I had 3 months, I got there, and I went and I found that gate. I found the gate that was in the photo, and I knocked on the door, and it turns out that you could stay there overnight. So I paid my $3 to stay overnight. And the next morning, I got up and I asked people, because I'd studied the language, I asked people, what's going on here? And he said, oh, this house used to be a prince's house. I said, prince? And they said, yeah, it's a replica of the palace. I said, palace? And they said, yeah, it's just around the corner. I said, it's around the corner? So I went for a walk, I found the palace, and I was talking to the guy outside. And he's saying, yeah, it's the palace. And I was like, okay. He said, there's a museum inside. And then while we were talking, a car pulls up, someone gets out, and he goes like this. And she walks by and goes in the door. I said, what was that? What did you just do there? Why did you bow like that? He said, oh, it's the princess. There's a princess? I said, yeah, there's 36 princes and princesses. 36? I said, yeah, the king has 6 wives. The king. So long story short, I stayed longer than 3 months. I basically took on a role as the royal architect for the king of Java, trying to fix up his house because he lost all source of income. The kingdom was kind of in decline. But turns out there's a cosmological model, a religious model that informs every detail of the architecture of the palace. So if this is the cosmological model of the central island of the universe where the gods live. And the island is surrounded by an ocean in yellow. And then there's a ring of mountains around the ocean, and then another ocean, etc., until we get to the big ocean beyond the outside wall. And so it turns out that that model was reinterpreted in the Hindu. We breezed right past the slides of Hindu city formation. But in the Hindu model, which came across the Indian Ocean and was transplanted here, they made it into a rectilinear model to reconcile the grids and the circles, and it became the palace. And I was the first person to be allowed into many of these areas, and some of them I wasn't allowed into because they were too sacred. But I was able to get an aerial photograph. This was back in the dark ages before there was an internet and Google Earth. And so this is the palace. And I spent 4 years there trying to help them fundraise and restore, rebuild the palace. But it was never about the architecture itself. It was about the spiritual elements that were activated by the architecture. And so you hear this brass band. So there's lots of rituals. I participated in a lot of these things. There's the king putting in a golden nail in the sacred column. So it's more than just building the buildings. The people who build the buildings and the process by which the trees are selected for carving the columns for building the buildings. There's a priest involved in prayers and offerings at every step of the way. And nothing happens in this palace that's not part of this order. And one of the big concepts that you guys studied in History Theory 1 is the concept of syncretism. Remember that? Who remembers syncretism? What is syncretism? Syncretism is the opposite of a melting pot, where in melting pots, you lose track of the source identity and it all disappears. In syncretism, there is identity, there's cultural identity, and historic continuity remains intact. So the Dutch Baroque pediment is part of the Javanese religious system. The Ottoman fez from Turkey is part of the Javanese religious system. The Dutch tuxedo tailscoat was incorporated into the Javanese costume and is a religious thing. The baritone horn and the French horn and the Baroque carriage that was a gift from the Queen of the Netherlands. All of these things are embraced and Javanized, and they become part of the Javanese religious system, even though it retains its bizarrely foreign identity. So here in the celebration of Muhammad's birth, they are incorporating the Hindu symbols of the male and female genitalia, because it's a mixture of Islam and Hinduism and about a dozen other religions, all in this mosque, which is related to the Balinese Hindu. This is the Islamic mosque based on the architecture of a Hindu temple. So, and it's still very much alive. Here's the master carpenter of the palace, who is also a priest. And he and I built some things together, and it was a blast. And we restored big parts of the palace, and the Aga Khan Award for Architecture was held there. There's the Minister of Culture, there's the King, there's His Highness the Aga Khan, and there's his translator to help them communicate. I was much younger then. Okay. So what? How does that help us understand how to find solutions in the 21st century? The clearest demonstration of that is not in the miasma, the mix and the mess of the 4 years I spent working with the King of Java. It really came in parallel to that when I was asked to go to Bali to help manage explosion of tourism in a way that reduced the level of harm to the social, cultural, religious practices of the villages in Bali. So while I was there, you know, when you go to Bali, and I predict that you will go to Bali at some point. Who's going to go to Bali? I bet you will. I think you're going to go to Bali at some point. You will find in the rice fields these decorative shrines. And if you're like other people who go to Bali, you will say to yourself, oh, how precious. They still do this quaint old religious thing in the rice fields. And I'm probably the last tourist to ever see it, because obviously the internet, cell phones, AI, it's all going to sweep through. Capitalism is going to sweep through and destroy all of these historically relevant cultural practices that they used to practice in their Hindu Balinese religion. And you wouldn't be entirely wrong. It is under fire. But shockingly, it is amazingly resilient. The people in Bali, they ride motorbikes and they have cell phones and they do a booming business. They're learning English so they can make money from tourism. But at night, when they go home, they bring their motorbike into the living room, because that's where you keep valuable things. And they put a little offering on the gas tank. That offering is there to make sure the gods take care of the motorbike. They plug in their cell phone so that it's ready, and they put an offering on the cell phone, because they have to make sure the gods are taking care of their cell phone, because they need it for their livelihood. There is not the kind of modernism sweeping away everything that came before that we assume, because that's normal in the way we experience the world. It is not normal in places like this. There's spiritual and emotional meaning in everything, even as they are deeply participating in the modern world of tourism, development, and money making, etc. And so let's go back to the structures in the rice field. The rice fields have been very, very successful for a long, long time. And how are they successful? It's because they developed a set of rules. And the set of rules are the result of the fact that they ask a great deal of it's one of the biggest population densities, the highest population densities in the world, that is supported by rice cultivation. And so their relationship with water and rice cultivation is extremely fragile. No one knew how fragile it was until in 1975. The international scientific community showed up and said, we're here to help, we're here to save you from poverty. We have scientifically developed these rice strains to work effectively with fertilizers and pesticides. And instead of 2 rice yields per year, we can give you 3 rice yields per year. A 50% increase, we can alleviate poverty and hunger. You're welcome. So they came in and the government signed up for this program. And the first year, their predictions proved true. The rice harvest went up. So the first year of the rice harvest, this is the normal rice harvest. And first year that rice harvest went up. Let's do the visual. Yeah.
Okay, so they gave them a new kind of grain to
Yes.
fight it?
Yeah, don't, those rice seeds that you saved from last year?
Yeah.
Just throw them away. Here's some new rice seeds. We're gonna give them to you. And here's some nitrogen fertilizer. We're gonna give that to you. So there was a significant increase the first year. The second year, and they said, thank you. Second year, it went up again. The third year, there was a slight decline. So what's the solution? What do we do in our Western systems? More pesticides, more fertilizer. And so just to make sure, some farmers were saying, well, I'm not sure if this is working. So the government said, we're not going to depend on the farmers to distribute the pesticides and the fertilizers. They hired pilots to crop dust. So the government spread the pesticides and the fertilizer in all the fields. And guess what happened? What do you think happened? Went down. And then people starved. By the 5th year, people were dying of starvation. What happened? And by year 6, they abandoned that system and went back to their shrines and priests, and they got back to the steady state that had been the case for centuries. So I was there, I had typhoid, I was just hanging, I was just chilling in one village. And these foreigners with American accents showed up. And I found out that they were computer scientists from the University of Southern California. And they were here to figure out what happened. And it was 15 years after, or 10 years after, after this whole thing happened, and the computer scientists were there to try to model how this system works. So long story short, because there's no time, it turns out that when you plant rice, so this is the planting of the rice. It's Wentworth students planting rice in Bali. It's a very complicated system that we learned about, that there's a volcano at the center of the island with a lake and volcanic soils, and they dig tunnels through the volcanic soils to bring the water from the lake. And here's what the tunnels look like. When the students walking through the tunnels, cut through the mountain. This was class one day in the rainforest, and we're figuring out what's the deal with this operating system coming out through the tunnels. So it turns out that at the top of the system, there's a mother temple and some priests. They say, let's settle, let's figure out when we all plant and when we harvest. Let's figure out the schedule to optimize the sharing of water and the control of pests. If we use the modern American system, what would we do? We know, right? We know how this movie ends. The wealthy people would control the water at the top of the system. And the people at the bottom of each of these water systems would get whatever water is left over, because that's natural, right? That's just how the operating systems work. So some people would thrive, and some people would do fine in some years and starve and die off in other years. And so that's how the system would operate if our current Western capitalist operating system were the way we did things. And that's basically what happened when the Green Revolution scientists came in. They said, ignore your priests, you guys plant as much as possible. Stop cooperating with each other. You need to compete. We're going to give a prize to whoever grows the most rice per hectare. And so they swept aside in this bold experiment, they swept aside the centuries-old system, operating system, based in the design of the landscape and the way it was constructed. And they swept it away and they replaced it abruptly with this competitive, whoever uses the most water and grows the most rice the fastest, they win. And it was an absolute disaster. It turns out that when you do things through those rules of the operating system, you cannot support the population that you can support if your operating system is all about cooperation. So, lessons for 21st century survival in spades. Like that is basically the 2009 first woman economist to win the Nobel Prize. She won the Nobel Prize based on her ideas of governing the commons. And she was inspired in part by this operating system that was being studied in Bali in the 90s. And so she came up with some rules. These are the rules of the 20th century. In the 20th century, it said all values need to be simplified down to price. Here's the price tag. All goods and services are priced, and that's how you know how valuable it is, by the price tag. The second thing they said is goods and bads, services and disservices, it's all part of economic growth. So if you're fighting a war, that's good for the economy. If you're educating the youth of America, that's also good for the economy. But fighting a war generates more economic activity. So fighting a war is better for the economy than educating the youth of America. See the problem there? And if you want to pollute, you want to dump stuff in the oceans or shoot your smokestack at the atmosphere, how much does it cost to dump a ton of noxious chemicals into the atmosphere? How much does it cost to dump a ton of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere? How much does that cost? What's the price tag? Zero. It is free. So basically, whoever extracts the most from the ground and pollutes the most, the fastest, gets the most money and they win. Let's run this scenario. Let's model this game. This is all game theory. Remember we did that in the second week? You run this game theory model over and over again, and you get the same outcome. You can have wonderful people as the presidents of the corporations. You can have the devil himself, president of ExxonMobil. The outcome is the same. Whether Jesus or Satan is the president of ExxonMobil, it's the same outcome. Liam, you had something? No? You had something?
Oh, why is war beneficial to the economy? I thought it crashes.
How did the US emerge out of the Great Depression? We mobilized industry, government pumped money into American industries and said, make cannons and tanks and aircraft carriers. Boom, the economy exploded and we said goodbye to the Great Depression. And the rest is history. So all semester we've been talking about the architectural instrumentation of large operating systems. And one of the extreme examples is Dubai. And this photo kind of summarizes some of the core messages of the course, that the architecture, when it's produced independent of basic human needs, and instead are satisfying the needs of this financialization industry, separate from the benefits of society and humanity, that it actually generates the conditions of its own demise. No one lives in these towers. And yet the construction of these towers, the cooling of these towers, the traffic jams getting to and from the bases of these towers, it's what causes the sea level rise that kills Dubai as a viable asset for future generations. And so if we're going to learn from some of them very, very old operating systems grounded in religion, if there's anything to be learned, this is the simple version. This is Eleanor Ostром's version, for which she won a Nobel Prize. And it looks very familiar. These are not the principles for just economics. She won a Nobel Prize in economics, but she called them design principles. These are design principles. And it wouldn't be crazy in Studio 7. What's our project in Studio 7, Ignacio? What are we doing in Studio 7?
In New Hampshire.
We're doing, so we're going to be, you'll have stuff to say about that. So I don't need to say anything. But keep track of these design principles and test them out and see if there's an operating system appropriate to the next project you face in studio, and see what the architecture is capable of producing. So I'm going to end there, and I want to throw this provocation to you. All the questions that are remaining are kind of now in your court. Sorry we didn't answer all of them all semester, but I think we gave it a good shot and we generated better questions. The rest is up to you, and I'm going to leave it there. This is my final lecture. Thank you very much for a great semester.
You have to refresh mine because I changed everything. Guy, this is the final lecture or the first one?
It's both.
Yeah. So I'm gonna I decided to change everything that I had prepared. So, but I want to start here because I think this is probably the core of this lecture, which is basic on communities as basic excellence. So let me start with this research. So this is the longest research that have happened in the world. Harvard have studied happiness for the last 85 years, surveying more than 700 people about what is the source of happiness, what makes us happy, what is the source of joy. Do you have any idea about the conclusion? What makes us happy? Let's do this exercise. What do you think makes us happy? Yeah. He said family, friends, what else?
Recognition.
Sorry?
Recognition.
Recognition.
Gratification.
Gratification. Yeah, but what makes us what produces gratification? Yeah. Satisfaction of what? Yeah. So how that comes? So they were, yeah. Doing what you love. Doing what you love. Say, doing what you love.
Teaching a wonderful group of students.
Yeah, real. So actually, so they survey career achievement. No. You have many people that have a wonderful career and doing what they love, and they don't be not really happy at the end. They survey typical answer. Healthy diet. No. Having good exercise. No, not all of none of them make us happy.
Those are basic needs.
Yeah. So having more money. No, you will have a lot of people that are really destroying the world because they are upset and dominating the world, even if they have a lot of money. Money? No. So the conclusion here, what they call social fitness.
Social what?
Social fitness.
Fitness.
Yeah. So, you know, parallels have fancy words for something that is common.
I've heard.
Yeah. So social fitness is basically about connections, relationships. Yes, family. Having agreement with others. And the reason, because for me it's really important to say that this class is because we were discussing a lot about the issues of the city, how it is cities have a lot of problems, a lot of complications, but at the same time, cities is a source of relations and source of happiness. So these are some of my photos of the thing that I love the most in Boston. If you recognize this guy.
Yay!
Yeah, so Boston and many cities have source of happiness because they are source of fighting against the thing that we hate, but also agreeing the thing that we love. So it's a source of connections, it's a source of relations. And probably, and that is a source of exercising our social skills and our social fitness. It's relationships, creating things together through cooperation. So probably, and I'm reminded, your principle this week, Tyler, is basically fighting against separation. So trying to find sources of connection, trying to find sources of interaction. And according to these 85 years of research, surveying more than 725 people, that's a source of happiness. So we will be more happy if we are more connected with others that we love, which is very difficult in the current world. There's a book by Robert Bonham that says that social capital comes with an active involvement of things that we love in order to create social networks. So it's weird because it's true. The city has a lot of issues, a lot of problems, a lot of things that separate us. But at the same time, it's the place where we can have more networks. Mari, you say that in one of our classes. You say that you talk about networks, all right? Who say that? I think so. Yeah. So it's creating networks that helps us to create more social relations and then also having more joy. So at the end, what he said, Robert Putnam, in this book called Bowling Alone, is that you can have strong connections that makes us bonded with others, but also we can have weak connections that help us to bridge with others. What he said is that you can have communities where you can have strong connections, like in our family. So the ones that are closest to us, the ones that are similar to us. So we have several connections with people that are similar to us. In my case, I meet every other week with Latino friends, and we gather to dance. We love to dance. We put salsa music and we dance together. And we're similar. But what he said, that is weird for me the first time that I read, is that what makes us happy is not only these strong connections with people that are similar to us, but also these weak connections that we do with someone that is different to us. So what makes us happy is sometimes when we meet others that are not really similar to us, and we discover certain type of boom, like similar things, similar spark, and that's hope. That makes us really happy. So he said that it's very important having the strong connections that we have in a gated space where we gather the other pieces the gate that are similar to us. But it's really important in order to create social capital, to create or to connect with others that are really different to us. So look at around. Are you similar to each other? So, but are you similar to each other? You say you are type and brand are the same. I'm gonna do something that is really uncomfortable. Allow me to do that. So name one in this room that you feel that are similar to you. Oh God.
Honestly, probably, Grant.
Grant. Okay, name someone that is very different to you.
Ooh.
I know that it's an uncomfortable place. We're in a safe space, a safe space.
Different from me?
Yeah. Don't say Robert, please.
Say Robert.
Yeah.
No, like. I'll say Pratima's different than.
Fine, okay. Why do you think you say that? What is
I don't know.
different between you and me?
Maybe it's because like I grew up in a place, different, like our perspectives are a little bit.
So you're coming from a different culture.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. That's true. You're different in that sense. Can you tell what is similar to you? What do you think is similar to Tyler? Do you know him? Not really.
Not really.
Okay, it's just an intuition. You have no idea, but let's pretend that you know. What is similar between you and Tyler?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
At the end, we're all the same in some way. So my point here is that we have things that makes us different, but we have always things that make us similar. Always things that make us similar. So we are all the same again. We are the guys who wants to be an architect, or we are already architects. So what he says that when you understand that you move away from the strong connections of people who are similar to you, you can find places of boom connections, because we have all multiple identities. And that was creates networks and social capital. So my point here is that one learning of this book that is how we can create economic communities not out of similarities, but also out of differences. And that if we create this connection, we can find sources of joy, and that only can happen in cities. I'm trying to connect these these two questions. So the space that help us to create these is not the space that are inside our communities, but that space that is surrounding our communities, and also the spaces that we don't know. So this is my exercise from one place that I work. So we have many communities there, and the source of joy happens in these networks that are between spaces. In some places that we call the lost space, you know that beautiful book. There is a beautiful book called The Lost Space. Is that the right?
Finding lost space.
Thank you. Finding the lost space. He said that because the book says that because of isolation in modern era, we are having lost spaces between one space and the other, and probably that is exactly the source of happiness. Understanding that lost space that we have between me and the other, between one community and the other, is the space that we can build, that we can rebuild in order to create social capital. So yeah, so this lecture I'm gonna do very, very fast because I want to stop 50 minutes before the end, just in case that we have some closer remarks from everyone. But this lecture, if you want to see that, look at the game, and because this basically goes back to the origins of communities. So because at the end, let me go back. So these connections that are happening here, there are bridges connection that goes beyond our space, is that the big opportunity that we have in cities today, that we can connect with someone that is different. At the beginning of civilization, we will all live in a strong network, in a strong connection, something many places that were looking inside. Remember that in the origins of civilization, we were living or protecting ourselves from the wild. So communities tend to protect themselves and to close themselves because we were protected from the wild. So, and if you go back into civilization, you see many examples like this one, like Tulu in China, these communities that were basically looking inside, protecting from the wild. So this is an indigenous community, and everything happens towards inside, looking each other, and the interior of the community were really porous and really open, where every community life happens, while the exteriors were really closed. And you see that again and again and again in many communities like this one. So where they carved the cave, that's in Tunisia, and they were looking everything inside, protected from the wild. And there was the moment that we had strong communities. So something has happened in the history. And again, there are several examples from the beginning of the civilizations, like this one in Venezuela, my hometown, of this community that protected from the forest, they built everything towards inside. So my question here is, and it's an open question, I'm not sure about this. So how we can translate this amazing life that happened towards inside of our community, but now towards outside, that we're not living anymore in the wild, that we have the city as an opportunity to create these weak connections. And this is a question that I want to leave open for everyone. So these are some of my experience working with indigenous communities, and you cannot imagine how beautiful is the life inside this chabono, which is the name of this type of construction. Chabono is this type of hut that they build around and everything happening inside. So my concern here is that there is something amazing happening inside in the life inside this community, because being here is harmful, it's dangerous, they're wild. Why we are still living or closing our boundaries, looking at our backyards, and this is happening everywhere, if we're not having the wild anymore outside? So what is happening with cities that these native or indigenous behavior that we close each other from outside is still happening? When you walk around in cities and you see that many buildings are looking towards inside of their backyard, they're collecting what is happening in the threshold toward the urban space. So for me, it's kind of the same that is happening here. Again, it's an open question. What is happening that we're still living with this society that looks everything towards the backyard and not connected towards outside, if we already discovered that connections with others is what makes us happy? So probably we have something to do with our urban design and architectural design, is understanding that connecting us to the others could make us more happy, and we can make the cities stronger. So these happen with my experience working with this community. So this is Venezuela, south of Venezuela, in this it's an area called the Alto Orinoco. Orinoco is this river, and in this particular place, they have different Yecuana community. Yecuana is a tribe. I was very lucky to live 1 year in this community, working with them. And currently, and I will invite those who are staying here in Boston, we are working with Abenaki culture here in Durham, in the regions of Namika. So instead of explaining what I did or I worked with the Yecuana community in the Amazon forest, this indigenous community from South Venezuela, or the Abenaki tribe, this indigenous community from South New Hampshire, I want to start this lecture with my takeaways of working with this indigenous community. And this is my last lecture, my last slide, or is the first one?
Yeah. No, it's the last.
So it's,
Of the first lecture.
I want to share the two things that I learned from working with these two indigenous communities that really connect this or really helps to connect this dilemma between working towards inside or living towards inside or living through connections or living through individualization through the others. So these are two quotes that I collected from these two communities. The first one was from Yequana community in Alto Orinoco, 2014, 11 years ago when I was working there. There is one leader that told me, I am who I am because of others. So, and that's, for me, it's mind-blowing, it's a blow mind. So we cannot define ourselves without others. This is the first takeaway. So Tyler, even if he's not really close to Fatima, you cannot define yourself without Fatima. But you are here and you are who you are because of her. So all of these networks that we have in many ways define us every time. We are not alone. And what I understood here that this is basically a fight against what I call the or dictatorship. So this idea that we have these things or the other, we have that thing or the other. So we have to fight against profitability in order to have social connection. It's profitability or having profit or having human connection. He said, yeah, what he said is why? Why one or the other? Why not everything? Why not we find other sources that we have profit, but at the same time human connections? And what are the ways that we can game the system to have everything happen at the same time? We cannot be ourselves without otherness. The other define us and other processes define us. And that comes to the second takeaway from Abenaki community that was last year. So it's for those who will be working in Durham, in University of New Hampshire, next Studio 7. We will be working again with Abenaki tribes. And there is one lady called Denise Pollock. You will meet her. We'll be working with her again, Studio 7 next semester. Those who stayed in Boston with me. She said something that still resonates in my brain is we can have it all. So let me explain the context. Paulo, you know Paulo? Paulo was a student from us. He's now in the master program. You know Paulo? Okay, Paulo. We were meeting with Denise. She's an Abenaki tribe leader from indigenous collective from New Hampshire. And he asked, okay, we want to integrate Abenaki values into our design. We want to integrate indigenous people into our design because it's really nice. We want to integrate everyone, including indigenous people. We recognize that these communities were wiped out from us from the last centuries. So we almost destroyed them. We almost eliminated them. But they are still there. We want to integrate them. And Paulo asked Denise, okay, what is the right infrastructure? What is the right indigenous infrastructure? What we have to build in order to be more indigenous? What we have to build in this town or in this landscape in order to have more indigenous sense or feeling or more indigenous value? And she said, that is not the right question. You're wrong. You're repeating the same pattern. It's not about indigenous, it's about everyone. So we don't want to have now a new indigenous community where we forget everything that happened in the past because this is what white people make to us. We don't want to repeat the same pattern. It's not about, we recognize that that happens, but we recognize that we are here all together. Black communities, Latino community, white people, indigenous community, we're all here together. It's not what is the indigenous infrastructure, it's what is the infrastructure that can be here for everyone, including us, including white people. So that was something that, what? Yeah, because we were trying to fight the system within the same system. Just having one infrastructure that is only for one type of people because they were neglected. So it's not the sense of having infrastructure for one type of community, but for everyone. What is the type of infrastructure where everything and everybody can gather and everybody can connect? And she said, we can have it all. So you have to learn something that we have lost because of isolationism, separation that we have learned in the past, because of the many things that we learned in this class. So automobile separate us, infrastructure separated us, the serious machines separated us, zoning have separated us. We have so many things that separate us. So why not we reimagine and this is the learning that we have from Abenaki, specifically from Denise, how we can have new type of infrastructure where everything can be together at the same time. Human, non-humans. When I say non-humans, it's organic non-human, but also mechanical non-human. Where people, bugs, birds, squirrels, people from different identities, the squirrels from different identities, robots from different identities, can come together and be all in the same place. And she said, I don't know how to do it, but it's your role to do it because we can have it all. So my two takeaways are quite connected, and I was surprised that one came from indigenous people from the south of the Amazon in Venezuela, very, very far away from New Hampshire, south of Durham, south of New Hampshire, and they were all basically talking about the same. It's the importance of creating this type of connectivity that we had in communities, and we can rebuild through cities, but we're not doing. But we are not. So this connection that we're missing. So it's basically fighting against the dictatorship. So why not instead of having one or the other, it's one and the other, and fighting against separations. I'm not saying this word because it's very difficult for me to pronounce. Can you pronounce that for me, please?
Isolationism.
Isolation. And that's it. Welcome to the class. So as we promised, we are finishing 50 minutes early today because we don't want to rush with you as concluding, because basically what will happen now is that you will say what is missing because you have to answer that for the final assignment. Remember that the final assignment number 1, is the most important one of the whole semester. But also, I hope that we have time for 5 minutes as a final reflections, if any. So if you have any, because we have this is the last time we will meet here in the lecture hall. So I want to listen from you if we can do something different or better for you. So like a final review of this. Okay, I will set for today. It's your time.
So you guys want to do your thing first, and then we'll broaden it.
I think that's the best. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have 15 minutes. You can take 3 or 4 or 5. We have more time for.
That is what I thought was like.
So what we answered and what we did, and then what you have to answer for the assignments for the analysis. Right. That's the question. So really easy. It's not.
We want to just go for 6 and expand upon it. So for our first question, we were looking at how can urban design prioritize joy, memory, and healing while still addressing basic needs. I felt like we kind of covered a lot of how we can foster communities that prioritize joy, like more so through like connections, having a lot of connections, whether they're strong or weak within a city, having places to make those connections is very important to foster those good feelings.
For question I'm gonna skip two. Actually, no, okay. Yeah, because I don't know that. Okay, for question three, and then we can come back for two. But when we ask in globalized world, how can cities preserve identity, community while celebrating modernization? I think that comes from culture, and we've talked about that a little bit. I think it's important for cities to like, even though we have to globalize it and make it, practical for everyone living in the city. I think it's important to not lose the culture, to not lose the people, because again, like that's what makes people happy. That community, that inclusivity feeling that you have in the city, that's what will bring joy for people living in the city. So I think it's very important that, to never lose track of those things, like never lose track of the identity of a city and the culture of it as well.
And I think to go along with this, especially for the example when Robert gave in from Sarkisrat Jarva, they still preserve in their identity and religion and keeping in their balance of religion while modernizing it over the years.
And that can be a reason to live in a city. That's one of the questions we're asking.
I feel like the modern approach to operating systems is kind of to focus on the industrial operating systems, but if we turn society to focus on like the community operating systems and how you operate within like a smaller community and how you communicate with other communities, I think that you can learn a lot more about how to effectively create a city that functions as a purpose for the people rather than as a purpose for like the machine.
And it's kind of like reaching toward their goal that infrastructure is for everyone and trying to fight against those isolationisms.
So what questions are most urgently needed, what questions most urgently need our attention between now and Tuesday?
I think personally, to me, I think how to prioritize the ones that lives in the city, or even like why live in the city or why not. I think it's a very complex question when I think about it because the inequality, like you mentioned it in the beginning of class, like people work in the city, but then like they don't live in the city most of the times, like.
I want to, but I can't.
Yeah,
I have
because
children to educate.
Yeah, and it's way more expensive too. To pay like if you live in Boston, it's more expensive than like if you live in, I don't know, Malden. So like just those inequalities, like how can we maybe start fixing that somehow?
Yeah.
How to start to implement things to change the view of society, like kind of switch from the modernization to people as a whole.
Yeah.
And are there any design principles on that list of 8? What do those look like? Like, can you come up with examples that show us how there can be stronger physical, spatial relationships that reinforce weak ties? Like, are there ways to design our spaces that we share that invite us to celebrate, maybe dancing in the streets?
Yeah. So yeah, if I can recommend something is we can find examples from the past. That's one idea.
Yeah.
So you find one space from indigenous communities and study how they make this type of human connection that we have lost. But another way is, and I would say that is even better, is to find spaces that we have today that you feel invite us to gather. And what is happening there? What are the design conditions that make us to increase this type of cooperation that Robert was explaining? I feel good, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We have a few minutes left. And our purpose is to listen to you. So this is the final job, we start tomorrow.
I mean, we have Tuesday, but this is our last time.
Yeah, this is the last time altogether, we'll see you again on Tuesday.
And yes, you're gonna see in your email. Lots of messages saying, fill out your course evaluations. And, just so you know. When students hit 100% course evaluations. When we meet with the dean, Sadat, she says, wow. Wow, impressive, Ignacio. That this, I really appreciate that you got your students to fill out those course evaluations. And when it's low, like if it's 20%, she's like, what are you guys doing? So you know, it matters. And maybe it matters more than what it says in the course evaluations. I mean, she needs to see that we're using the course evaluations to improve the course. To the extent that this course is successful at all, it's safe to assume that it's because students who have come before you have said, you know, that's fine, but have you tried this? Or, you know, this thing you did, it didn't work at all. Somebody needs to tell you this. You know, no offense, but it didn't work. And on a good day, maybe you should try this. Yeah.
And in the same spirit of today's class, so filling this evaluation is an act of generosity.
Yeah.
Because you are giving feedbacks for the future and for future generations. Because we take that very serious.
Yes.
So we read that carefully. The staff said that, the staff read that very carefully.
Yeah.
And we make change and adjustments of this class coming from these evaluations. And that is basically helping future generations to have better classes. So it's basically you're helping the other.
Yeah.
And also helping the program. If the program becomes better, your degree will have more value. So yes, so please take your time. That won't help you that much. And that will help the others and the programs to have a better class.
And you're gonna be hiring Winthrop graduates in a few years, believe it or not. And we're gonna have better employees because of the feedback you give us.
Yeah, please fill that out. Fill that evaluation. That's very important for us to improve.
Yeah.
Besides that, any other, I don't know, if you have any comments, because sometimes for someone who is much more easy to talk loudly, if you have any recommendation from us, or something that you think we can improve, do better, or keep that you really like, we're here to hear. We're here to listen to you. Don't tell that everything was perfect, but we know that it's not true.
I thought these together classes were kind of nice, just to get more perspective from other people and read our discussion posts as a group. That was effective. Made the class more fun as opposed to just going and presenting our usual work. This is a nice way to break it up.
So discussion questions, and what is the point?
Yeah.
I have one critique about what's the point. I want you to agree with me or not. Sometimes I felt that the what's the point became, is supposed to be a moment where students take a lead and the scope of the class. But sometimes it became a discussion between the team and us. And the rest of the class being a third party just listening. So I don't know, that was my reaction.
Yeah,
So I think in the future we'll have to do something to create more,
make it more,
more a dialogue between everyone and the guys. I felt sometimes was them and us.
Yeah.
And not them and everyone. So something we have to adjust in the future in order to do that. In my opinion, that was that's my reaction.
what do you think?
Basically.
I'm trying to, I think what's the point is good, because the whole assignment is just summarizing the discussion questions. I think it's hard to also collaborate with your teammates for using the week. I don't know how to improve that. I think you get together with the class before. I don't know. I just thought there was there wasn't a good flow. It was kind of hard to coordinate that. Especially with the time frame for discussions.
Just like the same thing you were saying, like there should just be more time in between like all the discussions and then like putting it all together, I guess.
Some more time between Wednesday evening
Yeah.
and.
So it's kind of like we all just like did it in the morning, which is not like, you know.
For the in-class portion, if people are up for it, maybe they could get up with the what's the point group and explain their post. Like, if there was a really well thought out post that somebody made, they could get up and explain their thought process.
I think one thing that could be helpful would be like a list of case studies for the analysis. Just finding something that fit in the topic was always kind of a challenge. And I felt like the rubric was a little strict, because if we're learning about these like super broad topics, but we have to organize it in only like 6 sentences. And like, I really liked the picture stuff, the diagram, I liked all that. But like, I mean, 1 week I lost 4 points for including an extra comma on the like citations. So I feel like maybe.
Yeah, 4 point is nothing.
Maybe
On the scale of the
4 points for.
It's four. It was from 1 point to the other. It was not 4 points. Yeah,
1 point.
it was 1 point.
Like, what?
It was 1 point.
It was 4 points. It went down a whole layer thing.
And you saved me and I corrected.
Yeah, but
So
I
yeah,
think
Okay,
the
Yeah.
rubric could be a little like,
no, it was from, yeah, anyway.
the citations are worth as much as like the diagrams and the drawings.
almost.
Yeah, that's right.
And like, I feel like I should spend
Doing
more
great.
time on the drawings than the citation.
Oh, absolutely. Our assumption when we do that, and I'm actually, the citations are probably gonna be a big part of what you write about in course evaluation. The assumption with the citations, and it's been true pre-COVID, that you lose a point you lose 2 points the first week. You lose a point the second week, and then for the rest of the time, you pretty much just get it right. And it's just normal. It's like, it's the easiest part about the assignment. It should be worth nothing because it's so easy. And we don't really understand, you can help us understand what makes the note citation format so difficult. Help us understand.
Yeah, so we have Maggie and then Giovanni and then Girl.
I feel like the restrictions on the specific type of picture that we can use for the analysis doesn't really help us that much because like there were so many weeks where I had like a really good precedent and then I couldn't find an aerial view that showed the surroundings. I feel like if you're able to explain the surrounding area and like explain the building and how it like connects to an urban like approach, I feel like the type of picture shouldn't matter. Like as long as you're explaining your ideas and explaining how it works, I don't get why.
Sorry, I have to say that the reason is because it's difficult to find this type of image is because we are living in an operating system where we see the object or the road. Yeah, that's true. That specific point of view is going against the system, the operating system. That's true. That's the reason because it's difficult to find. Yeah. Because we have planners that design the city and we have architects that design the objects. But the ones that connect both is difficult to find, and we agree that it's difficult.
And our job is
Yeah.
to fill in that gap in the discipline. The discipline has neglected this type of view for decades. And we need to quickly fill that gap. The other thing that your classmates have taught us in the past few years is, you know, you do the best you can choosing an image, but if it's lacking in some way, then please add additional images that allow you to do what you need to do. And so in the video, you know, I couldn't find an aerial image. So I show the image I analyzed. And then because I need to say something about the relationship, between the building and the surroundings, I throw in for 5 seconds an image that shows it from straight overhead.
And you realize that as well, it's more work.
Well, you don't need, you just show us so you can say it. Just show us.
Yeah. Giovanni and Liam, and we close, and we are out of time. Giovanni, please. Can you speak? Yeah, I don't hear you.
About the citation, it's the hardest.
No, it's also, management, how sets of, we assign returns and how competitive kind of gets, but also, I also just have difficulty with the citations, I don't always go back. But I would look at the article type, and then I ended up, like, you know, like different things like periodicals and journals and stuff. I tried to still online, but then like, what is that? Like, one time I had a meeting on, then just like, I have no idea how painful works, side by side to this.
We got that right? though.
Yeah, no, you're right, fast.
Yeah, you read that. That's a hard one.
So I know we are 5 minutes away, please be patient, Liam.
I really like the classes where both professors and we have both classes in the same room. Is there a reason why we split up one day and then reconvene the other day? Because I think it's beneficial for, I mean, I personally think that it's better when we have both classes.
Yeah, the reason because we have more time to. From my point of view, I can listen more from you if you're getting the point.
Okay.
And besides that, we listen to you and review the assignment, we go deep into certain topic. And actually, I confirmed that was useful last class. We were talking that last class was, in both sections were amazing. My last seminar I was really happy with what happened. I was able to listen from you, your learning outcomes, and how you got the points of the class. So that helped me to confirm, okay, we did it. The learning outcomes are there, regardless everything else. So that helps us to listen from you one-to-one.
Yeah.
And not only from those who are more free to speak like you, from others that are a little more shy or have other forms of communication, we can have this connection.
I agree. And last class was very, very beneficial. And I think that kind of class where everybody interacts and everybody talks to each other and presents is a lot better than just going over your homework.
I agree. And I learned a lot from that as well. So we were discussing that. We always introduce these new techniques every class. We meet every, yeah. So
more often than not, it comes from you guys.
Yeah.
You guys say, what do we do this year?
So in any case, I want to close with one comment that it tries to be a celebration. This comment. So we were having a meeting with other concentrations 2 weeks ago or a week ago.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago.
And
1 week.
I have to say that the complaints that other professors have are completely different than ours.
Yeah.
So I have the feeling that most of you did the readings and you learned from the readings and you demonstrated that with your analysis and with your comments in class. Great. And we got how you were able to translate architecture to the urban systems very well. This is the main topic of the class, and you're getting that. Understanding architecture is not an isolated thing. It's a thing that is connected to our own urban system, and everything that's happening in the urban system affects architecture and the opposite. The architecture affects everything. And this is already in your brain. And I have not seen that more and more after many weeks. So thank you for your engagement because you were able to comply these two tasks.
That's what came out of this meeting, is that the urbanism students are really engaging and changing and developing and bringing it to the discussions in a way that the other concentrations seem to not so much.
That's at least what you say.
Yeah, that's what it seemed.
Yeah. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. Exactly.
Thank you for all your excellent hard work this semester. It really means a lot to us that you invest the way you invest, you engage the way you engage. Just thank you so much.
Yeah. And this is not good for us. It's good for the world. I mean,
Good for the world
yeah.
to have you.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
yeah, thank you very much.